Representative Ivy with your bill. Let's see. That's 596. Shayla, would you read that in, please?
Thank you, Chairman, members. House Bill number 596 by Representative Ivy, relative to non-consensual pelvic and rectal examinations, to provide methods by which informed consent shall be obtained by the patient or patient's representative, to provide for definitions, to provide for exceptions to obtaining informed consent from the patient or patient's representative, to prohibit a medical resident, intern, or student from observing or performing a pelvic or rectal examination on a patient without the patient's informed consent, to provide for penalties and fines for healthcare providers, and to provide for related matters. Also, from our last meeting, there were amendments on the bill. Just to recap those are 1813 on your computers. It's changing the definition of healthcare provider on page 2, lines 8 through 10. It's also changing representative to patient's personal healthcare representative on pages 3. And also on page 4, it's removing the penalties and fines. Thank you.
Thank you. Those have been previously accepted. We also have a fiscal note that's attached to this. I'll make the members aware of that. So, Representative Ivy, on your bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, we kind of rushed through some of the big picture things last week because we were short on time. And I'm not going to take the time to go over everything that was presented, but briefly, the need for this was made apparent to me when reading some of the national news associated with the fact that some of these practices were going on in other states. I inquired about what was in law in Louisiana, and it was evident for myself that these protections and patient rights were not so clear. It's not that these best practices with regard to informing patients and things like that aren't practiced. It is simply that some things are not clearly defined in law. I've been working with the stakeholders on this. I appreciate the Board of Medical Examiners' testimony from last week. I think it was very eye-opening for many of us here. That said, I've been working with some of the physicians who are teachers at the teaching hospitals, and they provided and presented some best practices and ways to structure and organize this that fit with their current practice and policy. Also, it was brought to my attention other issues and things in the way that my bill was constructed and how it could interfere with practical medical necessities and things like that. I've been working diligently with the stakeholders. I believe we have a set of amendments that, beyond concept, I have a draft of it here, but was not able to get it in time to the committee. And so I believe all the concerns and issues have been dealt with, where it still honors the intent of the bill, but does so in a way that practically and pragmatically addresses some of the concerns brought up by the medical community. And so, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remove, unadopt the amendments that have been adopted. And if we could pass the bill in its original form to the floor, I've already discussed with the stakeholders that we can get the amendments drafted and we can have that set adopted on the floor. They, in my opinion, are technical in nature in that it doesn't change the object of the bill. It doesn't change the protections. It does reorganize them and restate them in different medical terminology and things like that. And so just in light of the time and stuff like that, and it really does honor the original intent of the bill, but does so in a more collaborative, conscientious way.
All right. Representative Ivy has asked to remove the amendments to his original bill. Is there any question about that? I think we're looking for that now.
The motion is to reconsider.
Reconsider.
All right, we have a motion to reconsider. Who will bring that? Representative, we got a question? Representative Presley.
So I just want to turn me There we go. I just want to clarify. So the amendments that you're wanting to bring will basically restate in a different form the amendments that have already been brought?
No. So it's a little complicated, and as you find out, sometimes you don't get to really hear from the opposition until you bring your bill.
Sure.
On the day, and so that's really when we began the more intense conversation on trying to come up with the best set of amendments. And for the purpose of simplicity, it's just easier to strip out what has already been added, which part of it was things that I personally wanted revised. There are elements of it that one of the stakeholders recommended, and we've taken a step back and looking at everything in a more holistic, comprehensive manner, and have kind of devised a better method for presenting the policy.
So I want to clarify, if we remove the amendments, if we vote in favor of removing the amendments that have already been added, we will not be looking at the amendments that you've brought today. We'll just be passing to the floor and making a change on the floor. Is that correct?
And again, I personally look at them as technical in nature.
Well, did the other stakeholders look at them as technical in nature? I mean, because my view is that the original amendments that you put onto this bill last session, last committee meeting, were pretty substantial amendments. I wouldn't say that they were technical. I mean, you took away the penalty, right?
Well, the criminal component of it, yes.
I mean, and that will be reinserted into the bill, right?
No.
Well, I mean, it will be as we pass the committee to go to the floor, if I'm not mistaken.
In working with the stakeholders, okay, who one of the attorney I'm working with specifically, and I'm happy to let him come and testify. We've been working together. Again, I'm happy to keep the amendments on. It'll just change the nature of the next amendment set. It's six one way, half a dozen other. I was just trying to be more efficient.
Sure, and I understand that, but I do think it's important that we hear from the other side that was in favor of these amendments initially.
I will withdraw my request if Drew, you'll just have a little more paperwork to do.
And I'm not. I mean, Representative Ivey, I'm not trying to say that we need to.
Sure,
it's your bill for sure, but I want to make sure that all the stakeholders are okay with this idea as well, since we already voted on the bill.
Absolutely. Happy to hear from them before we vote.
I'm sorry.
So there's no motion to reconsider?
So let me get that straight. There's no motion to reconsider now.
Well, I would like to hear from the stakeholders just so everybody can be on the same page, that we are on the same page.
Let me mention here, and Representative Ivey, we talked. I want you to have a good, fair hearing, and I interrupted you last time in the middle, but we are short of time. I was told yesterday that they're only going to take a few bills in the Senate. I'm not sure we're going to have time to go through all this, honestly, with you.
Go through all what?
This bill. So, but we're going to
All right,
go
watch
from
this. Okay.
We're going to go ahead and go through your for what you ask. And
I withdraw that request. I withdraw the request. I ask that you pass this bill as it was amended last week to the floor, so I can complete the amendment set that we've agreed on, that I've agreed with to the stakeholders. So I think all the issues have been cleared up as far as my knowledge. I'm happy to hear from the stakeholders if they want to confirm that.
all right, we have a question, Representative Turner.
I was asking about the amendments. He changed.
All right, Representative Presley. No, I'm sorry, Representative Miller.
Representative Ivey, I
Yes,
think
sir.
you stated that you are working with stakeholders very closely, and you won't move this bill forward on the floor without an agreement from all sides. Correct?
Right. I believe we're there.
Got you.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chairman, at the proper time, I ask that we move this bill favorably with amendments.
With amendments. All right. There's been a motion made by to go ahead and move this bill forward by one of the members. If that's Representative Miller, are there any opposition to that?
Well, point of order. No, we need to hear from opponents of the bill. We need to get through the hearing on the bill. Mr. Presley, on point of order.
All right, Representative Presley.
So this would be on the amendments that were passed last session, correct? Or last committee meeting, is that correct?
We're adopted.
And everything on it.
Okay.
All right. So, any other questions? There are no other questions. Do I have any opposition?
Green cards and
I'll read these cards in, seeking information only, but is willing to speak. Dr. Vincent Collada, also Kim Sport with LSBME is here and willing to speak. Either one of y'all would, Dr. Collada. I don't see Dr. Collada. Would you like to speak, Doc? Yes, sir.
Members of the committee, my name is Vincent Collada Jr. I'm the Executive Director of the State Board of Medical Examiners and in a former life practice obstetrics and gynecology for 45 years. I will tell you that this bill has significant issues in the day-to-day practice of even my specialty. I know it's written so that if a patient goes in to have for example, surgery on the leg, nobody would do a pelvic exam. But we don't address the issue of what about putting in a Foley catheter for that? There are a number of concerns that we have for the bill, and I think Ms. Sport spoke eloquently about the reason to address this issue. The issue does need to be addressed. The problem is the devil is in the details, and it's often been my experience, and I think some of your experience, that rapidly drafted in the heat of battle legislation sometimes does not do what we want it to do. And I think what we cannot afford to do at a time when our healthcare providers are being stressed and practices made difficult by COVID, we don't want to further make that practice difficult by adding these kinds of legislative initiatives that make it difficult to do their job. For example, implied consent. If you go to the gynecologist, it should be an implied consent. There's no reason to expect you would need to have a paper to say you're going to have a pelvic exam. I think there are a number of issues we have to address, and I trust that Representative Ivey will be honest and open with all of the stakeholders to do this, but you're still asking us all to buy a pig in a poke. And I would think that's the only comment I want to make, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Collada. Also, Kim Sport is Ms. Sport not here? Okay. She is information only. In support, Morgan Lamondre. Ms. Lamondre, would you like to speak?
Hi, I'm Morgan Lamondre. I'm the legal director of STAR. It's a sexual assault center. And at first I thought things were going to be very easy to get through. And now I feel absolutely compelled to come up here because, you know, obviously it seems like everyone agrees that when you go in for something for your leg, clearly you need some sort of separate consent for a pelvic exam. No one seems to be disputing that. But I really want us to think even more beyond that, and that people have a right to know what's going to happen to their bodies. And, you know, I'll share this thing that I laugh about now with my husband, because this is me in labor, and I have a consent form right here. I had a natural birth, so no epidural, no narcotics or anything like that. But if as a lawyer, I don't feel comfortable signing something without reading it. Well, as I'm in labor and in between contractions, people hand you a consent form and say, this is a standard consent form. Just sign it. It just says that you consent to giving, you know, us permission to deliver your baby. Well, in that consent form, and there's pictures of where I'm modifying it and striking things in there saying that should they deem it necessary without my knowledge, they can give me an episiotomy. And it is funny, right? But not everyone does this. Not everyone reads their consent forms. Not everyone knows. And we have a right to be told what's going to happen to us. And I think that looking at all of you, if you went in for something, even if you went in for a colonoscopy, right? You want to know what else is going to be done in that area. And I think you need to think broadly about really having patients that are being informed about what's happening. We have a right to know, even if it is medically necessary. We have a right to know and be able to refuse certain procedures if in fact we don't want them. And I'm sure you've all gotten a lot of emails about this. I know a woman named Kelly reached out to me because she has the same fears. And I just want you all to think, you know, it's easy to legislate when it's not your own body, but please just consider that even if it is maybe a burden on doctors to get an additional consent, we have to get into the place where we're having conversations with patients, and it's not just, I know best, do what I say. It's, let's have a conversation about what this really looks like. And yes, there are going to be medical emergencies where you can't have that conversation. I get that. But when it comes down to it, patients have a right to know what's happening to them and have the ability to refuse that treatment if they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I had a question. It's gone now. Have other cards. Mindy Escade, she says she is here and would like to speak. No? All right.
Is it last week? The 13th? Those are from the 13th.
Yeah, but he's still got to be a minute.
Right. Morgan Lemondre, if that was her then, I think. These are in opposition and wanting to speak. Matthew.
That's from the 13th. They may not be here, but we should give him a minute.
Okay, we're reading this, and this is from last week. Giglia. Is,
Like me to, I can try to express his concerns.
you come forward.
Yeah, she has.
We'll need you to fill out a card. You have a card in your hand.
She's got one. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's Mariah Brown. That's her. That's her. That's her. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Mariah Bowen. I am with the Louisiana State Medical Society. As Representative Ivy has stated, he has worked with our community. Going back to the bill from last week, we were still in opposition of the current instrument that you are reviewing. I believe there are a lot of unintended consequences of things that happen when you are under anesthesia necessarily. For instance, if the procedure becomes longer than the intended really was, you run into complications or something along those lines, then you're in a situation where the doctor may be, even if they're doing throat surgery, may be required to put in a catheter. There are a lot of unintended things that happen in the medical community. I believe doctors do the best they can with the knowledge they have up front. My doctors have been sending me all kinds of scenarios that I could probably stand here and read from my cell phone that you would probably rather not hear because they're quite detailed. But we remain in opposition of the bill in its current posture. We would have spoken against it. I'm sorry that Dr. Gillier is not here this week. He also is one of those physicians who does teaching rotations and had concerns with the fact that if you have students following you, a physical exam includes the visual aspect of just looking. And so even if you have it on a monitor, they are physically examining that patient. So the current instrument as it is, we do still have problems with. I know they had worked on a second and third version. I think we had gotten to a point on the third version where we were somewhat comfortable and we're going to be able to go neutral. I know there were some other amendments happening in the process, but as it stands, we are still opposed to this version of this bill.
Thank you. You certainly may. Representative Cox? Oh, try that. Wrong button.
Now, if I'm comatose, does this affect that? You know, like you got to do a, you know, I've never had anybody do anything with the rectal or with me without talking to me about it, but because I'm very sensitive to that.
I think most patients are.
But anyway, I'm saying, is this more effective for people who are really sick or comatose? Does that where you come in because you may have to come in and do something? Is that what your concern is?
I think a lot of, and with consent forms that you currently fill out, say you do go in for a throat, something in your throat, where you would have no reasonable expectation that you would be examined or touched below your belt. This is very hard to discuss, yes? But during the procedure, they find something that they didn't
requires
expect.
something else.
Yes, that requires something else or that
Yes.
goes longer. And then you're in a situation where you may have a nurse or a medical student that is learning that is asked to insert a catheter. Now you are changing the way that this bill would impact it. You are changing their ability. And I guess we're at civil penalties currently because we didn't pull those we didn't pull the amendments back, right? But you're still giving them concerns over what may happen after the fact. I am told from my physicians that if something occurs that's unexpected, they do have the conversation with the patient following. And from my own experience, I will tell you that I was one of those that had complications, and they did come back and tell me after the fact, this is what happened, this is what we had to do. I mean, even doing an appendectomy, I'm told if you get in there and something goes wrong, you're sitting right next to other organs that now you are viewing.
So are you saying that this is going to limit your ability to do the work?
I don't know that it limits you in an emergency situation
I
from
didn't think so.
doing their best to save a patient's life. I'm telling you, on the backside of it, the impacts to the physician community could have unintended consequences.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Turner.
Hey, could we get somebody from the LHA to come up?
All right. If while they are coming, Representative Miller, would you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My question is really for the author and for the lady speaking. So I think his intent of the bill is not to stop necessary procedures. If a Foley catheter is needed, the intent of his bill isn't to stop what a medical provider think is necessary. To my understanding, the intent of his bill is to stop medical providers from performing unnecessary procedures, doing a procedure without the consent of the patient. Do you agree?
I agree that is his stated intent. I do. I will tell you that when my physicians read the words on the paper, they are telling me that the unintended consequences of what's on the paper are different than what the intent. And I mean, my doctors would tell you that an unconsented touching like that, if it was not medically necessary, is already unethical and does not happen.
But the law does allow a medical provider, if they're teaching or if they have a student shadowing them and you're going in for a throat surgery, to possibly examine the anus like Representative Cox X, right?
Currently, yes.
Yes. So all this bill is attempting to do is say, get the consent of the patient before you perform such teaching methods. Correct?
That's the intent, but the words on the paper, they tell me do more than that.
Okay.
And not being a physician, I'm very sorry Dr. Julia is not here today because I don't feel like I'm doing justice to the question that you asked, but I'm also not a healthcare provider that can fully explain.
I understand. And I guess I just really want us to focus on the bill and not get sidetracked with, we're going to be limiting physicians from doing necessary procedures, because this bill is not going to limit them from inserting Foley catheters or from performing any type of next emergency procedures if needed during the procedure. And also, I think we need to remember that Representative Ivey have agreed to work with all stakeholders between here and the floor, number one. Number two, I don't even think you have time to move this thing through the process. So I just would really encourage us to, at the proper time, move it forward out of respect to our colleague.
All right, have a question by Representative Presley, excuse me.
Representative Ivey, wouldn't this be a battery already?
You would think.
An unwanted touching? I mean, that's the definition of battery.
You would think, but if again, we're in COVID-19, and so people who may want to testify aren't able to come so easily. But there's situations where people have been reported. Okay, again, I'm not going to speak specifically to Louisiana, but other states who have, again, similar laws and things not specifically addressed, which is why nationally there's a lot of states who've recently adopted similar legislation, which the original bill was structured after multiple states at what I felt was a best practice, type language, and so they get reported, and then the defense is, well, we've got this very generic waiver, notice that they acknowledged. And so that's a defense, and that's a legal defense. You said we can do whatever procedures, right? And so I think someone going in for a throat surgery, right? Now, if the situation necessitated, okay, because it became more lengthy for a catheter, that's obviously reasonable, and the doctor can inform them, we had to catheterize you. But a full, rectal exam just because.
Sure, and I certainly
By the way,
understand
there
and
were two
agree.
other, students who also, they're practicing medicine and getting some experience, and so, why not?
Yeah.
In other states, again, as I've, it kind of blew my mind, but there's no requirement to actually inform the patient that happened either.
And I certainly understand the intent of your bill, and I appreciate it, because I agree that no one wants the unwanted touching. I just, I after listening to the testimony from Mariah, I feel like there are some unintended consequences that are from this, and I certainly agree again with the spirit of the bill, but I do have reservations on the necessity, since there is already a law, the battery, that if there's an unwanted touching, that is a criminal offense now. But I appreciate you continuing to work with the players as we get to the floor, and I thank you for bringing the
unwanted touching under when you're unconscious is kind of hard to, recollect for most people anyway.
Sure, but if there's data that shows, a lot of these surgeries now are videotaped. There are
never seen a video of a surgery, not my own or something. I don't know if they can provide that. I'm gonna tell you, if I may, I'm pretty frustrated. Okay, let me spell this out for you, especially for some of the new folks. Okay, what the medical folks have done is cloud the facts with issues. Okay, it's amazing to me that a doctor, physician studying and practicing medicine for so long, is also in their spare time an attorney. Okay, because it says physicians read the words on the page and they tell me, they have concern of these unintended consequences, right? Nonsense. It's nonsense. Example, we adopted language that where we said medically necessary we changed that to necessary for diagnostic or treatment purposes. In the bill, I'm sorry, I'm working here. It says if the patient is unconscious and incapable of providing consent and the examination is medically necessary, a healthcare provider who performs an examination pursuant to subparagraph A of this paragraph shall inform the patient that an additional examination was performed and the nature of the examination. The healthcare provider shall notify the patient of the examination at a reasonable time before the patient is discharged from this care. Now, you tell me what unintended consequence if a throat surgery was the primary intent, and then they had to catheterize the patient. You tell me, based on the words on the page, what unintended consequences exist. None. Okay, I will tell you the opposition has worked behind the scenes. Okay, I find it disingenuous. It's frustrating. I swore to God I'd never come back to this committee from last term, and I'm here because this is an important issue. Who wants their 14-year-old daughter to go into an ER, okay? They're not there. Parents aren't there. They go in for a compound fracture, okay? And that some physician, if there's a student or whatever reason, they think that it's okay to not have to get informed consent from a parent or guardian before a rectal or vaginal exam is done. Give me a break, okay? Everybody who's worked with me knows me, okay? I worked with them on Sunday. On a phone call, they brought to me which is the learner language for learners. I'm good with this. Yesterday, I was brought this, which doesn't include learners, but just a blurb. And I'm like, and all I asked was, let's put these together. So I've got the language.
Respectfully, Representative
Right here.
Ivy, we haven't seen the language.
And look, respectfully, I understand. Respectfully, these are not normal situations. Normally, okay, we'd have the time. I understand delay tactics. I understand the opposition and their ability to influence individuals on the committee and things like that, and that's okay. Look, either move it or don't. That's your call, okay? You either want your children to have conformed consent before these types of procedures done, or you don't. And I'm okay with that. There are no unintended consequences, okay, in the current bill. As it's currently drafted, there are none. Okay? That's why they're not here speaking of specifics. And the one that was presented was nonsense. Because it says all you have to do is inform them if you're in a surgery and you have to do something like that. Again, clouding the facts with issues. I ask for your favorable passage. Give me the opportunity to move this. If not, I mean, look, it's up. It's, you know, there's always next year, and who knows what violations may occur between now and then. So this is protecting patients' rights. It's that simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ivey. Are there any other questions? If not, we're going to go to I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. We have another witness. Would you state your name and what you do, please? Thank you.
Sure. Greg Waddell with the Louisiana Hospital Association. I want to start by thanking Representative Ivey. We have certainly been working together over the past couple weeks. I appreciate that. I appreciate the call on Sunday. I disagree that there aren't any unintended consequences with the way the bill was originally drafted. We tried to come up with a set of amendments. Obviously, in the late nature of the work on Sunday till today, the amendments didn't make it to the committee. Certainly still remain committed to working with the representative on it. But I'd be remiss to say that I don't have concerns with the bill in its current posture.
All right, Mr. Waddell, would you fill out
I certainly will.
a red card, I guess? Okay. Any questions for the witness? Representative Ivey, you want to close on your bill?
Sure. On that last note, first he said that the bill in its original posture, and then he closed with the bill in its current posture. Again, the bill in its original posture has been amended. I included all of the concerns that were originally brought to me by the LHA. They're in the amendment set. And so while it may not address everything, it addressed everything that was brought to my attention at the time. And so you've got my commitment that we'll continue to. I've got the language right here. I'll ask staff to have that drafted for the floor debate, and I'm committed to continue to work with the stakeholders to refine that language and address any legitimate concerns. The problem is they want absolute control. They don't want to have. Look, I get the overburdensome extra paperwork issue. It's addressed, okay, and that's just more procedural, burden type stuff, paperwork. But I've addressed it in here. So I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Practically, it doesn't make any sense that this level of opposition and issues over something as simple as a patient's right to have informed consent on a procedure like that when it's not part of the actual procedure. For instance, if a lady was getting a hysterectomy, right, you don't need written consent because it's kind of informed consent because the doctor, it's part of the procedure. But if you're going in for a throat surgery, yeah, you shouldn't be able to do a rectal exam or a vaginal exam without a written consent. If it's procedurally necessary to do a catheter or something like that, then you just have to inform the patient, hey, we had to do this, and then that's it. So I appreciate your favorable passage on this.
And to put all this in perspective, we're back now to the bill as amended. It's been asked by motion by Representative Miller to move this forward with amendments. Any discussion?
Any objection?
Any objection? I'm sorry. Any objection? I'll object. We have one objection. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll? A vote yes is for the moving it forward. A vote no would be to reject it. Madam Secretary.
Representative Turner?
No.
No. Representative Adams? No. No. Representative Carter? Representative Cox? Yes. Representative Cruz? No. Representative Eccles? No. Representative Emerson? Representative Hughes?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Johnson? No. No. Representative Laverdane? Yes. Representative McMahon? No. Representative Miller? Yes. Representative Moore? Yes. Representative Owen?
No.
No. Representative Presley?
No.
No. Representative Selders?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Stagney?
Yes.
Yes. There's 7 yeas and 8 nays.
All right, the vote was 8 nays, 7 yeas. The motion fails. Would you like to voluntarily defer, Representative?
Yes. Do we have a motion to involuntarily?
Do we have a motion to involuntary defer?
Motion? Cox?
A motion to involuntary defer?
No motion.
No motion?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, House Bill number 435 by Representative Jordan, relative to non-consensual pelvic and rectal examinations, to provide methods by which informed consent shall be obtained by the patient or patient's representative, to provide for definitions, to provide for exceptions to obtaining informed consent from the patient or patient's representative, to prohibit a medical resident, intern, or student from observing or performing a pelvic or rectal examination on a patient without the patient's informed consent, to provide for penalties and fines, and to provide for related matters.
Thank you. Representative Jordan, on your bill.
Well, I thought we were going with 608 first, but I will go with 435. I understand that that most of you have already heard this, so I'm not going to belabor the point. There's the difference. Representative Ivey has a very similar bill to my bill. The main difference between Representative Ivey's bill and my bill, prior to the amendments, was that his called for criminal penalties, mine called for civil penalties, and it would have been through the Attorney General's office. So with that in mind, what I am willing to do, I can speak with Mr. Waddell, and I've spoken to Ms. Smith on this bill, one of the lobbyists working with them, and I'm willing to work with them on the way to the floor to put this bill in a proper posture. I think that's amenable to everybody.
All right, I have a white card only. Dr. Vincent Collada is here. I also have 5 emails in support of this. Do I have any opposition to moving this bill forward? Any question? I have a question by Representative Miller.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to move the bill forward at the proper time.
It is the proper time. Do I have any opposition to Representative Miller's motion?
I've got a question.
All right, Representative Presley.
Representative Edmonds.
Jordan,
I'm sorry, Representative Jordan. I apologize.
Don't confuse me with Representative Edmonds. I get that a lot. We always joke that we're twins.
I apologize.
That's all right.
Representative Jordan, have you had conversations with the stakeholders at this point?
You know what, I have, and what I did was I actually had deferred to them because they had been working with Representative Ivey for a longer time at that point, and I told them, look, if you want to work with Representative Ivey, I'm willing to do that, but I was always willing to work with them, and they told me if it came to that point that they, at the proper time, they would work with me. So I have no issues working with them at all.
Okay, and you know, I still have the same concerns. I agree with you on the need for you know, informed consent and making sure that you know, people are not being unwantingly touched. But during a medical examination or during a surgery, I still have the same concerns that I had with Representative Ivey's bill regarding, one, the fact that an unwanted touching is already a crime. It's a battery. And two, you know, the concerns about if a surgery or procedure goes longer than expected, the way that I read the bill, you know, there are significant concerns on that in that regard. So while I certainly understand the desire to make sure that people that you know are unconscious or not touched unwantingly, and I agree with that, I do continue to have my concerns about, medical procedures, and particularly, in our training hospitals, the need for our medical students to and residents to be able to observe and, be involved with the process of learning, how to properly do some of these functions. So, I just ask that you continue to work with the stakeholders between here and the floor to ensure that those concerns are addressed.
So, and I'll tell you, we'll definitely work to address that and get this bill in its best posture. So I'll give you my word on that.
Thank you.
All right, I do have a red card that just came in from Mariah Bowen, Louisiana State Medical Society. She is present and will provide information if requested. I do not have that request. So we'll move forward on Representative Miller's motion to move this bill forward. Is there any objection? Or we have an objection? Secretary, would you call the roll, please? A yes is that we are, let me get that straight. A yes would be in favor of Representative Jordan's motion moving it forward. A no would be to defer it. Madam Secretary. No. Thank you.
Representative Turner?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Adams?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Carter? Representative Cox? Representative Cruz? Representative Eccles? Representative Emerson? Representative Hughes?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Johnson? Yes. Representative Larverdane? Representative McMahon? No. Representative Miller? Yes. Representative Moore? Yes. Representative Owen? Representative Presley? No. Representative Selders? Yes. Representative Stagney? Yes. 8 yeas and 2 nays.
8 yeas, 2 nays. Motion is carried. We will move this bill forward. Thank you, Representative Jordan.